Hello, and welcome back to Chapter 3 of The Disruptive Data Architect. My name is Robert Vane. I'm a practicing enterprise architect with a particular specialism in data. In Chapter 2, I described how you can prepare for and start the challenging journey of enterprise data architecture. In this chapter, I will share with you how you can set the right principles, the right strategy, and shape both of these into the right plan of action. Because without these critical elements in place, your journey will be much harder. So, let's begin. Chapter 3. Have a plan or go nowhere. There's no point formulating any strategy or making any plans without first having a measure of success. So the first part of this chapter is all about defining the rules of engagement, and to do this you need a set of achievable goals, a yardstick against which you can define how your progress can be measured. In enterprise architecture we call these rules principles. One of the strengths of enterprise architecture in general is that principles are immutable, they are enduring, they are applied across the whole enterprise, and they come with the understanding of the implications and the policies and the scope of their use. There's no such thing as a vague EA principle, but rather than fully describing these principles as you would in, say, an EA framework, I'm going to focus on the essence of each principle, the context and the spirit in which they should be adopted. So, here is my suggestion of 6 principles of enterprise data architecture that you can use to set your stake in the ground and then to measure success moving forwards. Principle number 1. Data is defined consistently. If you can remember from chapter 1, my research revealed that data landscapes can be defined by a small set of atomic data components. Well, each of those atomic data components has a definition. You could call that definition the standardized definition for that atomic component. This principle has the goal of ensuring that the definition and usage of all the physical occurrences of that atomic data component are made and kept consistent and the same as the standard definition. For example, the characteristics of a UK postcode are well known. We know how long it should be, what a valid format of one looks like, how many there are in the UK, where we can get a source of master data for them, how they often relate to other atomic components, how we should classify and secure them individually and when combined with other atomic data components. So you would expect that all physical occurrences of postcode are the same, right? Well, my research showed the opposite, and this creates real operational risk and cost to the enterprise through having to manage and translate these different definitions. Or in other words, if all occurrences are the same, you can manage them the same and don't need to translate them or reformat them. Therefore, less effort, less code, less cost, less risk. So this principle is all about achieving a standardization of definition. So how do we measure this? Well, assuming that you took my advice in chapter 2 and have already discovered, catalogued, classified your physical data stores already, any standard atomic definition can be very easily compared against a complete physical data landscape, and the level of differences quantified and visualized. If you can automate this process as much as possible, you can use the improvements in consistency as a measure, and maybe more importantly, a justification of your activity, by producing regular dashboards and management briefings showing how you're making your overall data landscape more consistent and easier to manage going forwards. Principle number 2. Data is understood. The essence of this principle is all about creating knowledge about your data and sharing that knowledge throughout your enterprise. you should be able to easily demonstrate full knowledge in the following 6 areas. Area 1. The atomic data components that are mission critical to the business. Area 2. Where and how many times these key atomic components are grouped and arranged across the enterprise. Area 3. The business meaning and terminology of both individual data components and groupings. Area 4. The obligations that apply, the security classifications, the retention policies, and the current level of risk. Area 5. The volumes of data, how much data changes over time, where it is up to date and where it is not. And Area 6. What data components support the key business processes that make a competitive difference. These things you will firstly need to discover and catalogue and understand yourself. Then you can communicate this knowledge to your executive team and your key business stakeholders, building an accurate picture of the fundamental facts about your data. Principle number 3. Data is mastered. Data mastery is important, and this principle is there to explicitly call this out as a key task in enterprise data architecture. Mastery, for me, involves the following 5 goals. Goal 1. Ensuring data can be changed in one place only, a single master source. Goal 2. Validating data in that single master source at the point of entry or change. Goal 3. Ensuring any copies of that master source data retains the same version of truth, in both meaning and timeliness. Goal 4. Ensuring the lineage of any copied data can be traced back to its master source. And finally, Goal 5. Minimizing the number of copies over time, instead providing direct access to that single master source. A high level of compliance to this principle has a direct impact on operational cost. Less copies, less to manage, a smaller and more efficient data landscape. Principle number 4. Data is owned. So, now onto the people and the politics. Data is a mission critical business asset. It is owned by the enterprise and managed by the business. It is not owned or managed by IT. This is a fundamental mistake, thinking that IT owns the data just because IT looks after the applications, the technology tools that allow the business to store and manipulate it. So this principle is about making sure the business takes full ownership of data. My approach is to define 2 levels of ownership. Level 1, ownership of the atomic data components themselves. I call this data stewardship. And level 2, ownership of the physical occurrences of those atomic data components. And I call this data trusteeism. Now, stewardship is about setting the standards, defining the policies and the governance of all or a selection of atomic data components, where trusteeism is about ensuring that day-to-day activities and processes are implemented and monitored to achieve those standards and policies. Data architects do not own data either. They are the custodians of the metadata that describes it. The librarian, not the reader or the author. This principle can only be achieved, unfortunately, if implemented from the top of the enterprise downwards. This means you have to get buy-in to this principle from the very top of the executive tree, the CEO. Well, you should really get buy-in for all of these principles from the top down, because that's your mandate. Scary, but essential, I'm afraid. But don't worry, in the next chapter, chapter 5, called The Message is Mighty, I'll cover off how to put together the right materials and messages. But back to principles. Principle 5. Data is respected. So, what do I mean by respected? Well, the essence of this principle is ensuring that data receives a full duty of care. This is because with ownership comes obligation. Businesses collect data and produce information from that data for many reasons. Some of that data is commercially or personally sensitive. Some of that data comes with contractual, regulatory or legal restrictions. Data should be protected from misuse. misinterpretation, neglect and loss at all times. Data that is fully respected can be trusted. And finally, Principle 6. Data is engaged. Although some data is stored for historical purposes and rarely used, most data is a living, changing and active part of an enterprise. So, this principle describes how the enterprise should engage with this data to ensure that data, process and people work in harmony. And the ideal engagement of data, for me, can be described in 4 parts. Part 1. Data should support the task in hand. Processes and data should be aligned. Part 2. Data should only be accessed and changed by the people entitled to do so, and for a known and valid purpose. Part 3. All accesses and changes to data should be audited, tracked and be fully transparent. Part 4. Data and its meaning should always be shown together. Engagement is all about matching data to its use, and many commercial applications are extremely bad at this. So this is a principle that needs to be fought for and will quite often be a battle. At this point I'd like you to note that all of these principles have an element of a disruptive nature about them. This is why quite often enterprise data architecture gets placed behind application architecture. Applications are easy to sell on the promise. Vendors are very good at this, but generally don't fare well when held up to the lens of enterprise data principles. Also, you may have noticed I've worded the titles of these 6 principles very carefully to make them less technical and sound more like strategic goals for data, using more aspirational business language. And together, you may have noticed, they spell out the acronym D-U-M-O-R-E. Do more, right? Easy one to remember. And for me, do more invokes a spirit of wanting to achieve something better. So my advice is to get passionate about these principles. Keep reminding everybody about them. Always use them to measure the fitness of proposed solutions and applications. Embed them in the governance of your enterprise and strive towards achieving their essence as much as possible over time. Constantly link the adoption of these principles to successful solutions that embrace them. Point out when not adopting them creates operational difficulties. Drive that message home. Okay, so moving on to part 2 of this chapter, strategy. I'm hoping that hearing me describe those 6 principles, some seeds of thought have already been planted in you, possibly about how well your own enterprise has achieved or is attempting to achieve them. I'm hoping this because your enterprise data architecture strategy will be based on where the gaps are between these principles and reality. Your strategy will be designed to make reality move closer to these principles. So, here are 5 key areas of strategy that you will need to consider. Area 1. What are the current gaps between principle and reality? Area 2. Closing which gaps, as a priority, will be most beneficial to my enterprise? Area 3. Are current in-flight or future planned programs of change making these gaps greater or smaller? Area 4. How do I decide on, justify and present a long-term strategy of change to govern the process of closing those gaps? And Area 5. How would I communicate the strategic business benefits of adopting these principles from now and forever? You may have noticed no mention of technology or tools here. Keep technology out of it for the moment. We're creating an enterprise data strategy for the business, right? But most of all, your strategy needs to tell the story. It needs to say where you are now, why that place is not good a place to be, why action needs to be taken now, how you will measure forward success, what approaches and steps you will take to solve the problems, why and how the enterprise will be better as a result of you taking these steps, And what will happen next? What's the plan of action? Your strategy shouldn't really go into detailed timescales, plans, costs or technologies at this point. This is because you first need to get agreement about what your strategy is. And this is a big message to digest in its own right. You can also kill your strategy stone dead with details if you try and lock down all aspects in one go. You need to be patient here and resist the pressure to explain every minute detail. Ensure that your strategy is understood, wanted, and that the next step, detailed options of roadmaps, activities, costed plans, will be produced soon. Basically, if you sell your strategy, your plan will be fine. Otherwise, your plan will have no chance of getting anywhere. Your strategy, like your principles, are meant to be enduring. Now, on to part 3, developing your plan. The trick here is to now introduce choice. There will always be a number of routes to deliver your long-term strategy. We are enterprise data architects. We document where we are, we define future states, we oversee and govern the process of delivery, but we don't actually do the delivery. The more routes and options you present in your plan to close the gaps identified in your strategy, the more chance you have of finding a combination that will be accepted. Remember, enterprise data architecture is a hard journey, a long-term journey. Don't try and achieve everything too quickly. But on the other hand, here are a few things to consider when developing those initial options. Options meant to grab the attention of business sponsors and persuade them to take action. Consider 1. Introducing your strategy to in-flight funded projects, still in their early stages, guiding and shaping their solutions. 2. Focusing effort on the gaps that deliver the best return on investment early in your plan. 3. Also, consider focusing initial effort on known data problem areas, ones that the business are constantly moaning about. 4. Initially, look for low-cost, high-impact options and routes. And 5. Find options to close gaps in areas of the business that provide the most competitive advantage. Because your plans will change over time, but your strategy and principles need to remain consistent and strong. So the plan that you share shouldn't look too far ahead. You should retain that long-term plan yourself. Reveal the medium and longer term activities as elements of your initial plan start to show results. Build on your successes. So now you have the principles, ways to develop a strategy and some approaches to form a plan of attack. The next chapter, chapter 4, titled The Message is Mighty, will explore how to formulate and socialise your knowledge, principles, strategy and plan into a consistent message to make sure all the people you need to help you will stay with you. Goodbye for now.